Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra Goel and very warm greetings from Rob Tutorial. So the news is finally there. The uncertainty regarding class 12th examinations for all of you is over now, in the sense that students enrolled under CBSE and ISCE, the examination this year has been scrapped. It must be a huge relief for all the candidates who are appearing for the exam this year along with their board examinations. I know the stress that goes into the board examinations themselves, and therefore it is a huge relief for all of you with all the pandemic and everything around it. So now that the uncertainty is over, you can focus totally on your CLAT preparations for all the candidates who are appearing for class 12 along with the CLAT examinations. This is good news for all of you. On that note, so before we dive into the newspaper, there are certain doubts that I have to clarify. So one was a statement from yesterday's newspaper. The social media will provide the identification of first originator of information on its computer resource as may be acquired by a judicial order. So the doubt was, what does this statement mean, and does it mean the court is deciding or the government? As per the new rules, it is the government who will be deciding this. This is what the article had questioned, that things that were only available through judicial orders are now available merely at the tip of the government's request. So, and in case you do not comply with the government's order, then you can go to jail. So this is what the question now is, that social media companies will now have to give up information of users, their private information, their chats, everything based on government request and not judicial orders. That has been the norm till now, and therefore WhatsApp had challenged it before the court. Then moving on, another question was related to economic sections and news related to economy and how to prepare for it. So see, there is definitely one question that is going to come from economic section. All right, so the first and the most important topic for economy becomes the budget. So we have done in-depth analysis of the budget itself on February 2, and apart from this we did about the economic survey on January 31st. So those two become the first two most important news. Then the news related to GDP figures and how, what impacts GDP, what is GDP, all of those kinds of questions then become important. Then thirdly, specific policies that the government comes out for economic benefit. All right, and fourthly, policies of the Reserve Bank of India, which are monetary policies. All right, so there is an editorial here today which discusses the RBI's annual report. So I'm going to talk about those monetary figures then. So it is these kinds of questions. Understand this, in economy you will either be asked questions related to explaining a definition, what a term means, or you will be asked to explain what is the impact of such an economic policy, which is basically knowing that economic policy altogether. And thirdly, direct figures. So last year you had questions about Atmanirbhar Bharat plan, right? So therefore those are specific figures. Let's say vaccines ke liye how much has the government set aside this year? 35,000 crores. So that is the stance that in generally, or questions that can be asked. All right, then moving on, another doubt that students have had is related to the power and appointment of administrator in Lakshadweep. The Lakshadweep administrator is directly appointed by the president. The administrator's office is similar to that of the governor in a particular state, directly done at the pleasure of the President of India. So the government directly appoints these people. No other body or the opposition has any influence in this regard. So the administrator is basically a nominee of the central government in a particular union territory. Then there was another question about Pakistan, or when we had discussed the Israel-Palestine dispute and how the viability of a two-state solution or a single state solution. So in a two-state solution, Palestine would be on the West Bank and on the Gaza Strip. They would be separated with the territory of Israel. So the question was, can it be possible? Is it feasible? Does it happen? And did it happen in the past? It did happen in the past between Pakistan, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, which East Pakistan was liberated by India to become Bangladesh today. So definitely it is possible. It is a little difficult in terms of that you have to have a lot more aerial transport, or let's say sometimes if different island groups, all right, who are part of one territory, then also to control that territory or police that territory would require naval services. So it obviously is far more easier to control a only landlocked territory, but it is definitely possible to answer the question, is it possible to have countries which may have territories across different areas? Definitely so. When India was a colonial state of the United Kingdom, a country in Europe and in the northern hemisphere, had territory in Americas, territory in Asia, territory in Africa. So it is definitely possible to do it, all right. There is no bar on a country being completely, all the territories being in close proximity to each other. Then there was another question of what is intersectionality. Intersectionality is, for example, as an individual, every person has different identities. So you may be your gender, your caste, your religion, your nationality. So all of them are different identities compared and combined into one individual. So intersectionality is a concept that analyzes how your different identities affect your standing in the society. So let's say a male and a female. The society treats them differently, sadly, but yes. Does a society treat a upper caste male differently to a lower caste male? Yes, there is a difference in that. Then does the society affect the education level of a lower caste female with a higher educated lower caste female? Does it differ? Yes. So intersectionality is basically understanding how different identities of an individual affect their standing in the society. So while our constitution under Article 15 says that we don't have to discriminate and the state will not discriminate, the society in general does so. And how all of that different identities affect the status of an individual in the society, that is what is related to the term of intersectionality, all right. It is a term in the Oxford Dictionary since 2015, originally coined in 1989 in a Columbia Law Journal article. Intersectionality is basically understanding different identities and how they affect you or your standing in the society. Then there was another question of what is confederation and what is a federation, and what does cooperative federalism mean. So confederation is, let's say, so each individual, let's say I and all you viewers are independent individuals, right? Let's say we get together and we form a group. That if countries do it, that is known as a confederation, all right. So when, for example, countries get together in Italy, this had happened when city-states of Venice, Florence, Rome had come together to form the Italian Confederation. Similarly, in medieval Germany, this had taken place. So those are confederation states. West Indies are a confederation of different island states of Dominica, Antigua, and Barbados. Different countries there, that is in the Caribbean region. So they form a confederation. So for certain places they form as a united group, otherwise they are separate sovereign states, all right. So that is an example of a confederation. Then what is a federal nation? A federal nation, India is a federal nation. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Union of states. So separate state identities, right? Similarly, United States of America. 50 states of America decide to come together to form the United States of America. In India, we have the Union of India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. So there the Indian state is a union of different states together, all right? So that is what a federal state is. Here, these are not sovereign entities. In a confederation, you are already a separate sovereign identity. Here, separate states in a federal structure, separate states, they are not sovereign in themselves, but or they do not claim that, see, I am a Punjabi national, I am a Rajasthani national, I am a Bihari national, nothing of like that. We all identify that we are Indian or Indian identity, but we claim that, see, these are indivisible entities of the union, that these states have a higher stakeholder. India becomes something, or something becomes India only when all these places come together. And that is what federalism is all about, that there is a union government which deals with separate functions, but the states or separate state entities are the one that are far more proximate to the people, and they have specific powers which cannot be taken away from themselves. In India, though, that division of power comes from the 7th schedule of our constitution, all right? Now, cooperative federalism is that it's a term to say that, see, the union government, it can always be possible that different state governments, the central government can be run by different political parties. But that does not mean that they look for their political self-interest and not the interest of the state. For example, recently this controversy between TMC and BJP. All of this is saying that this is not in the spirit of cooperative federalism. Or with the GST Council, where opposition states are actually the one who raise the concerns of all states, and the state governments that are run by the political party of the central government, they don't raise much of concern against the central government. That, see, cooperative federalism as a concept is that you see yourself as representatives of the people and not representative of the party. That if there is a concern of Gujarat's chief minister, he should be able to advocate it against the central government, even if they are run by the same political party. Prior to 2014, all of this was far more prominent because we were run by a coalition government, and in general there was far more discussions or even sometimes open questioning of policies of the central government by the political leaders of their own political party. Even in the parliament this used to happen. So this is healthy in democracy. But this is what the concept is, that, see, you have to look for people, you have to look for interest of India at large and different states at large, and not political interest. That is cooperative federalism, all right? There is no hard and fast definition. It's a concept in general for better functioning of the democracy, all right? Then moving on, in the last aspect is, all of you had put out that, see, some of you had put out that, sir, please highlight in the newspaper what you're supposed to read. The yellow highlights on headlines is exactly those articles that you should be reading. But see, there are articles that I highlight which are definitely relevant from point of making notes. But there are certain ones which I don't highlight, which are for general reading. All right, you don't have to make notes from them, but you can just generally read them, all right? And sometimes the line can get blurred between them. For example, this headline. Now, there is very unlikely that you will get a question from this headline. However, it is important for our discussion today, right? So therefore, sometimes the line is blurred. That is why at the end every day, I do point out what are the things you have to note from today's newspaper, right? So make sure that things that I tell in that section, you don't skip them. But there are always certain editorials which are better for your overall intelligence upbringing. See, as a reader of the newspaper and not just as a reader from CLAT perspective, you also have a responsibility towards yourself to grow your knowledge, right? CLAT is an examination where you have to maximize your knowledge. But in general, as a human being, these are also your learning years, right? Though we remain a learner, I believe I am also a learner. I learn from the newspaper every day when I read it. So there are still certain things that you have to read for your general understanding and upbringing. So therefore those I cannot highlight because it's part of a series, it's not part of the mandate of our series, but still there are certain things, and that is why in the series I point out that, see, this is for your general understanding, you should give it a read. Then there are also those instances where you need to read the newspaper to enhance your reading speed, enhance your reading habits. So once again, that is beyond the mandate of the series. Still you should be giving it a read so that you enhance your reading. All right, so focus on these different aspects of the newspaper. See, a newspaper is for various audiences, and articles are also for variety of audiences. Keeping all of that in mind, you have to read the newspaper and see the series accordingly. All right, but articles on which you have to make notes, I tell you every day at the end of the video that these are the things you have to note from today's newspaper. On that note, let's begin with today's newspaper analysis. So on the front page is the news, the good news that exams have been cancelled. Now you may ask another question, that what would be then the date of the examination? So we need to wait from CLAT consortium to confirm that. Ideally, month or 2 months gap would come from the date of announcement of the date. All right, so that would be the likelihood. Now therefore the clock gets to start getting, or will run a little quicker in our mind, because we get closer to the examination. All right, then moving on the front page, give details on scheme for orphan children, says Supreme Court. So while hearing a public interest litigation, the Supreme Court has stated that, see, what is the policy that you have come out with to children who have become orphaned or who have been abandoned by their parents due to the pandemic. The court was informed that details about this are only in press notes, that the Prime Minister announced that we are going to provide them with free education, we are going to provide them with stipend once they attain the age of majority. From 23 years onward, they will get a lump sum amount. But all of this, what is this corpus fund? Where will it be maintained? Who will maintain it? When will the money be dispersed? How are you identifying who are these people? Do you have a database of these children? And all sorts of things. Do you know whether they are in schools? What private school they are in? So all those details, now the court has asked that give us the details of this scheme. So we need to wait for that. Then moving on, apart from this, on the front page there is news, IMD increases monsoon rain outlook by 101%. So this is better than normal monsoon that is expected this year, which is good news for our overall farm sector and all the economic sectors that are reliant on rainfall and monsoon for its growth. Then moving on, apart from this, on the national news, little of importance for us. So we move to the editorial section. So the main editorial, COVID Diplomacy 2.0, a different order of tasks. This is that what are the challenges that await our diplomats across the world. So until the second wave hit us, we were looking to export the vaccines to, as per our vaccine Maitri scheme. But now the tides have changed. The tables have turned, in the sense that now our diplomats need to look for vaccine import, because we are facing vaccine shortages. Whatever be the reason, that is the challenge that is highlighted. Then secondly, we are also looking for raw material to expand our own vaccine production. And thirdly, it talks about that, see, India, even if it has lost the buck on this regard, it can still move ahead and lead the world in terms of another thing. Reports have come out that, see, the coronavirus could have been something created in a lab. If that is the case, then we need better laws to avoid such a scenario and hold those accountable for creation of such a thing. The suggestion is using the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention, or the Convention on Prohibition or Development, Production and Stockpiling of Bacteriological and Toxin Weapons and their Destruction. So this is basically bio weapons. weapons of mass destructions. Bioweapons are also similar to nuclear weapons because they can cause damage to huge population in a short period of time. So the editorial's last part is India can call for review of the CBD as it is known and updates its convention to include such viruses also, where countries can create virus to spread across populations at the world. So this is another thing that the editorial talks about. It is policy based. You can give it a general reading but not so important. Then tedious revival, that how can we revive our economy, that see our economy has contracted among the world's largest or significant economies. India's fall has been the most significant. We have had the largest contraction in terms of that, and it is the highest contraction in our region also, that is Asia. So therefore the task is huge before India. Huge unemployment is there in our country. The poverty levels have risen. So the task for the government is cut out. And how can we do it? So the first thing is that we have to have vaccination, because we can't keep on having waves after waves, and we cannot keep on keeping the country in lockdown. We can't have sustained economic growth with lockdown. So we need vaccines. Then secondly, we need to focus on jobs or investment that creates jobs and boosts income of the population, which gives money in the hand of the people. Because in case you have lost a loved one because of COVID-19, or in case your family was hit by the pandemic and you had significant health costs, so then you have ran out of savings. And how do you recoup your savings? By earning more income. So this is what the challenge before the economy is. Then the second one, breaking the cycle of child labor, is in India's hand. That only the government and the state can do something to reduce child labor in general, enhance education, provide for more nutrition. There was a reduction in child labor in general from the decade of 2001 to 2011, which showed that the midday meal scheme, the Manrega scheme, and different social welfare schemes had a positive impact on child labor, that it went down. But because of the pandemic, challenges of online education, family members or poor people abandoning their children, there is a risk of higher child labor. So the government needs to take steps to ensure this doesn't happen, that we don't reverse the positive trends of our country. All right. Then the second one, when two is too little. So what has happened in China now? Because for consistently their policy of one child, now the country has more older people, or more people who are dependent and less people to support them. This is compounded by the time when this phenomenon is happening, even before the country reaches a level of sustenance, or poverty is completely eradicated, or people become self-sufficient. China, because it enforced from the political party there a policy that was not socially acceptable. In general, there is a concept of replacement level and total fertility rate. Total fertility rate is how many children are being produced in a lifetime of a woman. The general replacement level of total fertility is 2%. That is, a couple, let's say A and B, have two children, that is C and D. Now they have replaced their population. If they pass out or pass away, they still have two people. So the population then stabilizes. All right. Now different countries recoup this either by enhancing immigration, that where populations are rising, people can go and work there. But China doesn't support that much immigration. This is the situation now that confronts China, that at one point its dependent population, that is population above the age of 60, is now 18% of its population, and it has very few children that are being born, which means that the percentage of dependent population will keep on rising now, unless it starts producing more babies or it starts having immigration in its country. Now, immigration is definitely not a policy for China because the Communist Party of China believes in a monoculture Chinese identity, that China belongs to the Chinese identity as prescribed by the Communist Party of India. Alright, Communist Party of China. So definitely it will not provide for immigration such as United States of European Union, which are multicultural, multi-ethnic societies. China has been clamping down on Xinjiang province and Uyghur Muslims precisely because the Uyghur Muslims do not fit into the cultural identity of the Communist Party of China. So therefore, now to recoup or avoid the catastrophe of economic slowdown, once you don't have enough working population, the economic growth will stall. When there are no workers or people who can work, how will you grow? And all the jobs that are there in your country will then move to somewhere else because the economy in itself will still run, but those businesses will go somewhere else. So now China has therefore come up with the policy of having 3 children, and it is also thinking of incentivizing the cost of child rearing, that it becomes cheaper for population to have children. In India, we have flirted with the idea of compulsory child planning. However, even without that, we have reached the replacement level of 2%. In majority of the states, we have population at replacement level. In some, we have even lower. Lakshadweep, Andaman, Nicobar Islands, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Delhi. So there are areas where we are even, the population is actually slowing down. So except for certain states where it is above 2 per TFR. So therefore, this is also a realization that compulsory family planning in itself can have economic consequences that are not natural and how it can affect the growth of the economy at large. Then moving on the op-ed page, what explains the surge in FDI inflows and what impact does it have on economy at large? So this shows that, see, in India, the FDI inflows in the country has been at record levels. Now, why is that happening is suggested that, see, all of this is coming because of net portfolio investment and foreign institutional investment, what FII and NPI. What are these? Basically, this is people investing in stocks of different or companies trading in the Indian stock market. So this investment is temporary or short term. Just because a stock price of a company is higher doesn't mean that the company is growing at a higher pace, it is creating far more jobs, or it is creating value for its workers. In general, in a public sector undertaking or in an ideal scenario, if the value or profits of a company are growing, the profits or the income of all its employees should also grow. And this should then mean that the income levels of the workers grows. When income level of worker grow, the economic or people dependent on these workers, their income also grows. However, as you would see from stock prices of big companies such as Microsoft, Apple, or Tesla, right? Or even Bitcoin, right? Now, their stock prices have remained high. They are expensive stocks and they have had huge rise. But the gap of income between Jeff Bezos at the lowest or the worker at the lowest level of Amazon is humongous. It would take 300 years for the worker at the lowest level of Amazon to reach the level of Jeff Bezos, which shows that, see, this is what is explained in this article, that these institutional investment, FII or NPIs, are basically things that boost the stock price. This does not mean that investment in the economy is growing, even if you have higher FDI flows. So in general, you will see the FDI is rising, but what it means is only you have to dig a little deeper. What within the FDI is increasing? And in India, it is the FII and NPIs. What this means is that this is not sustainable long-term investment, because let's say today I invest $10 billion in a stock. Immediately the stock prices and the FDI will increase, but the next day only I can take it out, and this does not translate into any income increase for its workers, for the company or the economy. Therefore, before jumping on to saying because we have higher FDI we have better economic situation, that is not true. The more sustainable economic growth or investment is direct investment into India or green investment. What does that mean is that this is more sustainable investment. Let's say Tesla or an investor decides to establish a new factory in India, and it will be built over 5 years. It will work for next 15 years. That is what is going to create jobs. That is what is going to create better in economic infrastructure in the country, and that is sustainable developmental growth. So this is what the gap between FII or portfolio investment and direct investment is, and what is happening in India right now. So this is an important one. You need to know it because a passage related to it can come. Try to understand what this is. Understand the difference. As I told you, institutional investments or portfolio investment are short-term investments. They do not translate into higher job creation or value of the company or increase in salaries of its workers. It does not translate into higher sustainable growth of the economy, and it is the green investment or direct investment into India which actually increases sustainable growth in the economy, which in India has been going down, that is minus 2.4. That is, no new long-term investment is coming in India. Then moving on, a fatal war on transparency. The official secrecy on pandemic policies aggravates a crisis. This is talking about how all the committees, different information regarding pandemic is not being provided by the government. A democratic government is answerable to its people. In our country, the editorial argues that the opposite is happening. We are going towards a situation of black hole, that information with the government remains with the government. It does not seem to be answerable to the people who have elected it. Then the economic toolkit revealed that the monetary policy of RBIs have run its course. What are the policies that the RBI can deal with? Monetary supply, that is money supply in the economy. What has RBI been doing? It has reduced the repo rate. When the repo rate reduces, credit becomes cheaper. Secondly, what has RBI done? It has also reduced the cost of lending from banks to its customers. So therefore, the banks can get credit at a cheaper rate, customers can get credit at a cheaper rate. But the editorial states that, see, these policies have run its course, that the RBI has been at a forefront. It has maintained stability in foreign policy, foreign exchange, that rupees value has remained stable. Then at the second time, the credit has become cheaper. However, because there is low demand in the economy because of the COVID pandemic and lockdowns, there has been a shortfall of aggregate demand. People are not demanding. So if there is no demand, let's say if schools are closed, no one is actually purchasing pens or pencils or erasers or sharpeners. So why would a company who makes pens, pencils, sharpeners take more credit to enhance production? If they have nowhere to sell it, they will not expand. So the credit policy or money supply policies of RBI have run its course. Now it is time for the government to take control and do something about its fiscal policies, in the sense create policies that enhance demand in the economy, which in turn affects the growth of the economy. And at the second time, RBI cannot continue with these measures because inflation in the economy is rising at record level, as it highlighted in the cartoon here, that fuel prices are rising and the worker or the citizen is overburdened with the cost of living, which is becoming more and more expensive by each day. Then moving on other national news. So the BRICS foreign ministerial meeting happened yesterday. India chaired it, and they collectively stated that, see, there is grave concern about the impact of pandemic and they will come to India's aid to help us. Then court in Dominica to hear Choksi's case today. It is going to determine whether he will be deported back to India or not. Then Justice A.K. Mishra, as we had discussed yesterday, has been appointed the new NHRC chief. So that in itself is an important news. The committee that selects the NHRC chief also becomes important. Then the DMA Act is a 2005 vintage, was first enforced during the pandemic. So as you all must be knowing, the controversy between the meeting in which Mamata Banerjee turned up late and left early. Along with her was the chief secretary, who is the first bureaucrat in the state, was Alapan Bandyopadhyay, a IAS officer. He was supposed to retire on May 31st. He was given an extension by the ministry, but then was given deputation to the central government. The state government did not relieve him. He did not go and decided to retire. So now the government has used the DM Act to file a case against him under Section 51 that give us reasons as to why you did not attend the meeting. If your reasons are not satisfactory, he will be put in jail for 2 years. In a meeting which was only delayed by approximately 15 minutes, and based on the orders to whom he was answerable, that is the chief minister, he decided to leave early. Now, the DM Act, the Disaster Management Act, has been in force in the country since last year. It is using the Disaster Management Act. The powers of the state are centralized. In the sense, the central government under the Ministry of Home Affairs becomes the central body. So the moment COVID-19 was declared a national disaster or national emergency under the DM Act, all the response of it was now with the central government. And in that regard, now under Section 51, Mr. Bandyopadhyay has to answer as to why he did not attend that meeting, because the purpose is it could have been life-threatening. That he not attending this meeting could have been life-threatening for its people. The intention of the section is that whether this happened in this case or not is now to be determined at a later point of time. But for us, the Disaster Management Act becomes important. It is using the same Disaster Management Act. The Supreme Court had questioned the central government that, see, you have all the powers, you have the budget, then why are you not procuring the vaccines? And it is on this only the Supreme Court had questioned the central government about oxygen supply. It is using the provisions of this. They had questioned, why are you not issuing compulsory licenses to enhance production of vaccines? Using this act only, the central government receives all the aid and decides how much is to be distributed to each state. So this is what the act is and why it becomes important. All right. The act came in backdrop of the 2004 tsunami that came on the Indian peninsula from the Bay of Bengal. All right. Then moving on other national news, the Supreme Court stays order on oxygen concentrators. Delhi High Court had removed IGST. The Supreme Court has now stayed that order and asked the central government to respond to its plea about why this should not be imposed. Then moving on the other national news is government has now re-permitted use of oxygen for industrial use. So because of shortage of oxygen, all oxygen supplies were being used for medical purposes. That has now been returned because the demand for oxygen has gone down as cases has dropped. Then on the left hand side, NCPCR tracks data on orphans. What is this? National Commission on Protection of Rights of Child. They are the one who will be quantifying the data of children. As per them, 9,346 children have lost their parent or have been abandoned during the pandemic. So this is, as per them, the total data that require assistance from the central government for support, which the Supreme Court will hear further. Then moving on the international news, China jails blogger on Galwan clashes. So who is this blogger? Hui Ziming. He had questioned the Communist Party official figures, which had stated only 4 soldiers has passed away in the Galwan clash, in which India also lost its soldiers. Indian official figures are always true. It does not hide. In this regard, army sources are never seen to be lying. But that is not the case with the Chinese Communist Party and its military. So in that regard, there the citizen had uploaded a blog questioning them and has now been given jail sentence of 8 months. This is the difference in a democracy and a authoritarian government or a autocratic state, where you cannot question the government. Whatever the government says is correct. Alright, so the name of the blogger becomes important because this is related to India-China dispute. Then the Sri Lankan cargo vessel has finally been extinguished. It is being called Sri Lanka's worst beach pollution in the history. The name of the ship, that is MV Press Pearl. The container company is based out of Singapore. Damage claims have now been filed by Sri Lanka against the cargo vessel company, that see, you have to pay for the damages for cleaning up the marine pollution that your ship has caused. Then apart from this, WHO has given nod to the second Chinese vaccine, that is Sinovac. Sinopharm had become the first Chinese vaccine to be given approval, and now Sinovac has also been given approval for emergency use by WHO. So it has become the second Chinese vaccine. Till now, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines have been approved by WHO for emergency use across the globe. Then moving on, Moody cuts GDP forecast, that India's forecast for its economy has now reduced further in response to the COVID-19 second wave, that probably our economy will grow by 9.3%. Now this is to highlight the importance of economic news and foreign policy, economic policy in general. Alright, you will not be asked what is the figure that the government has projected, but it seemed important that how wave or demand in the economy affects the growth of the economy. Alright, then on the sporting front, nothing of real note for us. So on that note, I will conclude for the day. In today's newspaper, 2 most important news. First, NHRC Chief A.K. Mishra, then the Disaster Management Act, and then 2 policy related news that you need to understand. First, the child or population control measures and how that affects general population economic growth, and then secondly, RBI monetary measures and institutional investment versus direct investment. So those are policy related understanding. In case you are asked application based questions, understanding these editorials will become important. Alright, so 2 factual news, 2 policy related news. On that note, thank you so much. If you have any further doubts, let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like in case you appreciate the work that we do, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to it. On that note, thank you so much. See you all tomorrow.